Alright, so I played a game recently which is called Siege of Treboulain. That's a very difficult to say word, and I think it's supposed to be French, which has always caused me problems. Anyway, it's a choice of games kind of game. It's a text game, and I very much like a lot of them. I'll say straight up, but this is one of the best choice of games which I've played. There's a lot of choices which I do feel that like they matter. There are a few different ways of role-playing, which is pretty major, and everything was tied up well. Questions answered, results announced, so on and so forth. It's very, very good. But I would complain about certain obfuscation and confusion with the choices. Still, a definite recommendation. What is it about? The city of Treboulain, okay, I specifically need to pause every time I see it, is a place to be. The magic surrounds every aspect of life. The exquisite cuisine, beautiful sea and gardens, and the magnificent centuries-old tree is a crown jewel of it all. But the monarch's life in this city isn't just a pleasant stroll in the park. During the harvest festival, which only happens once every 9 years, an assassination attempt signals the beginning of something much darker and sinister. The siege. Objective: the complete annihilation of a populace, the monarch and everything the people stand for. So it's up to the ruler to make the difficult choices on how to approach that task, manage the supplies, and the people, and the army. All the while the immediate danger looms right outside the door. So, what did I like? The first and foremost, I'd like to complain about the choices and their results in these kinds of games. I think text games are a bit of a step back from the traditional video games. You won't go around slaying 500 rats in the most spectacular way, but the sheer depth of choices on display is vastly more than any RPG can offer. However, many fail to truly grasp how difficult and how much there is what goes into this. So many games can have a story and a whole lot of choices, but which might slightly alter the dialogue, or maybe some character will be a little more upset, but for the most part not much would happen. All this is to say what Siege of Treboulain is none of those things. There are a lot of plot lines and choices to them all, and every single choice felt impactful. That is exactly what is so great about these games. I love role-playing as a ruler of a city-state. I love trying to add my own spin to how I would govern, to challenge myself and imagine how would I act in such a situation. This is why I loved reading as a kid, and when I grew up, exactly why I loved video games. The stories, the experiences, and the exploration of what could be it realistic or a fantasy. Tying into that is the either-or nature of a lot of these choices. A lot of times I've been presented with a choice which might upset one faction, but make the other faction adore me. For example, there is a choice to invite mages into the army. It is a siege, so all hands on deck, makes it quite a bit of sense. However, their religion is deeply tied into their magic, and as such they are prohibited from using their powers for violence. They're still free to aid with moving the supplies, enforcing the walls, or helping through other means, but of course, the army wants them help indirectly. This was great. I felt like at any moment, with one wrong choice, I could have a knife in my back. One wrong move and I will just show myself as a weak ruler, or an easy way out. The enemy does offer a choice to surrender the sovereignty to stop the siege, and the game truly sold me on that. Oftentimes again, compared to other games, often the player is shown choices which effectively do nothing, telling a slightly different story, but none of those would offer a possibility of something like betrayal, of surrender, or of a failure. I will have to play more, and I am sure I will see more flaws, but so far on the first playthrough it felt genuine. And speaking of not pleasing everyone, I kept looking at the stats and trying to figure out what would be the correct choice. There is a certain flexibility to any person's character, and this game tested me in that way. I knew what I wanted to present myself as a magic user and a scholar, welcoming the common man and not really elevating myself above the rest. But I also knew that the city needed to be united, they needed finances, and more people in the army meant everyone would be safer. As such, I sometimes was very much compelled to choose something I wouldn't otherwise. To ignore Hearthstone, and to maybe be a bit more polite with a flamboyant and frankly little annoying Celestino. And, well, obviously because I'm reading that game, I don't actually know how the names are supposed to be pronounced. After all, if I purely focus on the safety and the army, ignoring the arts and the public image, the rug would be swept from under me, and the second there is an opening, people would turn on me. It's a careful balance which I absolutely loved and wish the games did more of, or at least this well. These are all tying into the game and roleplay aspect of it, and they are extremely important, which is why I praise this so highly. But there is more. What did I dislike? So, the problem with this all, and something you might notice and praise, is I don't really comment much on the overall story, because it's actually rather simple. The queen dies, the city is magic, and the Siegen people are afraid of what might happen because of it. And the secrets aren't really complicated either. The story is very much something that could be seen 100 times in any other form of media. There's absolutely nothing unique about it, aside from perhaps the usage of magic. Plant magic isn't new, but having a whole society and a religion built around it, without any other magic except for another minor one to contest it, is a bit different to most of the stories. There are no fireballs or lightning zaps, and instead it's this, which is just more interesting because it's a bit of a different take. In addition, the antagonist, I felt like he was presented in writing as this big, intimidating and powerful man, but there was nothing to truly show it. He was just a faceless entity following a prophecy. He didn't actually have much personality. The first scene with him was the only real time he displayed any. Other than that, he is, well, big dude. There was just nothing to sell him as what the story tried to sell him as. So he was boring. Very, very boring. Also, it's a bit minor, but there were a few things which were felt left unexplored in my single playthrough. And I specifically stress this because I'm not sure if there are answers with different choices. So the first is, how did the successor come into town with his royal guard? That wouldn't be done without someone noticing. No explanation. My guess was that Hearthstone colluded with him to usurp me, but there was no proof. Aside from that, there were the few times Skeg made contact in the city. There were spies, there were double agents, there were people trying to join them. It's never explained how and where they got in. Who they've worked with isn't shown either. And lastly, the pirates. They are shown as a very major problem, keeping the city blockaded. And then just ignored. I kept expecting a choice to fight them to show up, to maybe even open a way to escape the city if the siege gets too bad. But nothing. They almost vanish from the story instantly. And it doesn't seem they even block much, as the foreign trade negotiations still happened unabated. And lastly, this is a bit of a big one, is the choices themselves. So a list Witcher 3, for example, with the option regarding Dijkstra in the bathhouse. At one point there's an option to suck up to him or not. Nothing else, just do. As it turns out, not means kicking the crap out of him and storming out. I wanted none of it, and I'm still salty that blocks out a very major questline. This game has a bit of a similar issue. Sometimes the choices on offer seem like the correct choices. For example, early on, there's a choice for the archers. How should they react to the enemy? I decided that it would be a good idea to leave it up to them. Pop up when they feel necessary. Not unified, randomly scattered. This backfired horribly, and the main reason stated was that, I quote, "The Treboulain army is used to working in unison, and this tactic might work for you, but the soldiers only face more casualties." It's not an exact quote, but close enough. So it was never stated that they are trained like that prior to the scene. Also, the might work for you bit feels like a jab toward the player. It's like I was supposed to sit there on the wall and fight everyone single-handedly. Frequently the game has times like that, and it's not obvious what exactly does the choice mean. I can say something and have it come out entirely wrong. Which is realistic, I am frequently facing this, but it felt very frustrating here. As such, I quickly found the game's save folder and kept going back and forth, save scumming essentially. And the game became a lot more satisfying. I think if there was a display, what does the writer think that means? For example, this reply would have plus piety, or plus idealism in there. I would find it a lot easier to figure out what it is what I am actually selecting. So, even with all that, I believe that this game stands strong and far above the other choice of games. I doubt it will make for a good book, but that's the beauty of it. It doesn't have to be a good book. It doesn't have to have the greatest twist, and instead can weave an intricate net of choices and consequences, leading to a beautiful tapestry of a game.